Welcome to everybody. Thank you for coming to this talk and experience. Mary, High Priestess, and Mentor You Never Knew. So let me just ask, how many people here are active Catholics? Just raise your hand. Active Catholics. Okay. And how many people have a connection with, maybe even a devotion to Mother Mary already? Okay. And for how many people is this kind of just a bit new territory, finding out about Mother Mary at this level? Okay, very good. Excellent. So what I want to invite you to do is just close your eyes and just feel the weight of your body on the floor. That's Mother Earth's embrace of us. And just spend a moment reflecting on who Mother Mary is to you at this moment. What do you know about her? What don't you know about her? What does she mean or not mean to you? How do you feel about her? Are you passionate, curious, neutral, ambivalent, negative? Why? Okay, and just open your eyes. So today what I want to do is share in a few different regards. One is to talk a little bit about my personal journey with Mother Mary and how I've come here to this moment, basically. One is to talk about Mother Mary as a priestess of divine birth, a conscious priestess of Immaculate Conception. I'd like to talk about Mary as a priestess, as a teacher, as a healer, as a mother of children, and as a womb master. And then in the last hour, I'd like to lead us all in a journey with her, an inward journey. And if and as there's time, at the end, I might do an oracle with Mother Mary. I don't consider myself a Mother Mary channel. It's more, I go into my open state, which is basically the state of our birthright. We all have it intrinsically. I've just cultivated it a bit. And I call her in as inspiration. And so we'll see if there's some Q&A that wants to happen. Yes?
Did you say she's a womb master?
A womb master. And I will explain what that is as we go on. Okay? All right, so a little bit about my personal journey. Oh, and about questions. So what I'll do is I'll kind of go through each section, and then I'll open it to some questions, and then we'll move on to another section, and then open it to some questions, all right? So it took me a long time to come around to Mother Mary, and I was brought up Catholic. And those of us, you know, who have been brought up Catholic, how many were brought up Catholic? Okay, yeah. She's one of those figures that's both admired, but also, as a young woman, sometimes you want to distance yourself from her because you don't really want to be associated with all of that virginity business, and it's kind of next in line to the nunhood, and, you know, people don't want that who are not going into the nunnery, right? So you know, I always knew she was there, but I didn't really go that deeply or look any further. I was much more interested in Mary Magdalene. How many people are familiar with the opening to Mary Magdalene that's been happening over the last 30 years, like the reawakening of the Magdalene understanding? Okay, good, yeah. So as I went through my life, as I went through my spiritual growth, as I went through my academic path, I began to have a new awakening or series of awakenings to Mother Mary and really come to understand her in an entirely new way, a taste of which I'm here to offer you today. When in the 90s, I started becoming involved in the goddess movement. How many people are connected with that? The sacred feminine? Yeah, okay. And So what did I start finding out? We were looking at all these goddesses all around the world, and these lectures and presentations also included Mother Mary. And I thought, oh my gosh, there she is, the goddess in my own backyard. I never thought of it before, right? She actually is a goddess. So that was in my mind. And then I went to the California Institute of Integral Studies and got my master's and Ph.D. there. And in my master's program, one of my teachers and mentors was Charlene Spretnak. And it turns out that she has a devotion to Mother Mary. And I thought, well, gosh, here's an intellectual woman who is really into Mother Mary. Okay, let me take yet another look at this. And then I also, one of my teachers was Lucia Chiavala Birnbaum, who talked a lot about the black Madonnas, you know, the positive valenced black Madonnas that we find all throughout Europe. Then as I was going into my doctoral research, and I wanted to research priestesses of ancient Greece, I received this downpour one day. Divine birth is a real thing. So starting from that supposition, I started then looking at the priestess history and material and legends and everything in Greece. And I had this whole big revelation that there is plenty of evidence to show that across the ancient Mediterranean world, women at the highest holy levels were engaged with divine birth as a holy practice, a practice of ascension and a practice of world service. So of course, right on the heels of that was my new understanding of Mother Mary. It had sort of put Mother Mary in context for me and helped me understand, oh, she's from a series of lineages. She's from places, connected with places all over the world that have been doing this practice. And I'll talk a little bit about divine birth in a moment, but I did begin teaching about Mother Mary as a divine birth priestess in the San Francisco Bay Area, where I lived for about 20 years. And then when I started Seven Sisters Mystery School, I began teaching about her there as well. Really, though, focusing on the divine birth aspect. And it wasn't until the last few years that I've come to expand my research, both personally, inwardly, and academically, to understand that Mary is much, much more. She had a life. She had a ministry. She had a teaching practice. She was a mentor, all of those types of things. She had an ascension from her body, right? All of those things. One of the pivotal moments for me was when I attended the Holy Womb Chakra System course that Cindy Lindsay taught in Laytonville, California. And this is based on teachings that have come through Sri Kaleshwar, who is a late saint. He passed from his body in 2012, but he left this great body of information about the Holy Womb Chakra that he gathered from the ancient palm leaf manuscripts, these dried palm leaves that were written on by beings known as the Sapta Rishis, the 7 sages of the world, and others. He says Jesus wrote some of them, Mother Mary did as well, and so forth. So he was able to collect suitcases of these manuscripts, and he developed a series of teachings. So Cindy, a student of his, was delivering this information in like a 5-day extravaganza. And on day 4, she said to us that here's the deal about Mother Mary. What Sri Kaleshwar says is that she was the greatest holy being who walked the planet. The greatest holy being who ever walked the planet. And I will be talking a little bit about some of why we would come to that conclusion as we go on. But just suffice it to say that I was blown away, you know, and the other people in the seminar with me were similarly, you know, basically brought to tears. It was such a strange experience knowing that this Hindu man had essentially returned Mother Mary to me in Technicolor. And so it was a relief, it was a door opening, it was a deepening, and it was a whole new chapter, you know, of my connectivity with Mother Mary. So Cindy told us that Mother Mary was the master of the Holy Womb practices, that there is a chakra, it's an 8th chakra, it's in the body of women, and men have the fragrance of it, but it is its own kind of system. And there are various tools and techniques that you can practice that have to do with mantras and sacred drawings known as yantras and prayer techniques and so forth to purify this womb, to clear it and cleanse it, and sort of raise it to its level that would have been with what we received in our original divine blueprint as human beings. And she said that Mary had worked esoterically with Jesus from the time he was in her body. And so this really helped Jesus become the master that he did. So that was all well and good. You know, I was starting to spiritually and academically understand Mother Mary in this larger way. Now on the emotional level, you know, I feel like spiritually and academically I was going up till like 10 p.m., 11 p.m. on the round clock. But emotionally I was still somewhere more like 6 o'clock. And so this discrepancy started becoming more apparent, which is something that I think is happening for a lot of people now in this time, this very intense time. A lot of people are being forced with to face their wounds, right? To face their stuff. If it's not one thing, it's another, but therapists are filled to the gills now with clients because of what's going on the planet. So a lot of us on the spiritual path went through you know, a lot of this a bit earlier in order to be ready for this whole influx of people awakening this way. So this was like a time of my deep inner work. And so my own backstory is that when I was 10 years old, my mother died of complications due to lupus. So that was a whole traumatic event that continued to be traumatic as, you know, I had an abusive step-family situation and so forth and so on. And so there was a lot that I had to look at and deal with and heal. And also being a spiritual pioneer and teaching things that most people were not yet ready to open to was an added source of stress. So it's, you know, it's been pretty intense for me. So I had a pain body that was clamoring for attention and love, and inner children that were wanting care and so forth. And as I began to work with this in a new way, I realized that Mother Mary could help me. She could be a healer for me. She could be a teacher. She could be a mentor. And one of my esoteric priestess friends basically affirmed that. She said, yes, she can actually regestate you in her womb. And you can ask her to be your mentor and be your teacher and be working with her. So I began just at times working with her, sitting in her lap or having her hold me, or going into her womb and having her protect me or remother me or what have you. And I still do, you know, to this day in the middle of the night. And I just realized, well, you know, you're never too old to need and want mothering. And so who better to call upon but Mary, the master of perfect mothering? I finally realized, oh, she is that being. She is that archetype. So I had a few miracles then connected with Mother Mary. One of which had to do with my own womb. And I had a cyst removed, and I had had people, friends of mine, hold me in a pink blanket of Mother Mary's light during the surgery. And when I woke up in the surgical room, I'd forgotten all about that. I had even asked whatever, you know, I didn't even know the surgery was over. All I knew was that I had this profound feeling of Mother Mary's energy flooding me. And I thought, oh my God, you know, she really is real, right? And they had given me ketamine, so of course I was in this massive oracle state. It was great. And I thought, yeah, you know, and my ancestors came as well, my grandparents. And so that was my miracle number one, was really strongly feeling her presence in that room. Miracle number two was that about a year later, there was like a hard mass that suddenly appeared on my ovary. And I got kind of scared about it. And they were testing it, and they were doing ultrasounds and this and that, and it was saying findings significant. My own clairvoyant mentor was saying, wow, there's something going on with your pelvic, before I even said anything, she said, there's something going on with your pelvic floor. I can't get it to calm down. And that really freaked me out. So I realized, okay, it is time for me to start doing these mantra practices that I learned about in the Holy Womb Chakra System teachings, but that I stubbornly refused to do at the time because I like to do things my own way. And I don't want to be beholden to any gurus or any systems or anything like that. But when I went into meditation about the situation, what I received is, no, there's nothing really terribly seriously wrong with you. We're just trying to get your attention so that you will do these mantra practices. And I said, okay, I will do it. And then by the time I had the MRI and got back to the gynecologist's office, a new gynecologist, and he was like rifling through the papers, flustered and everything. And he said, well, what is the story here? And I said, well, I have a mass on my ovary. And he said, well, there's nothing there. So meanwhile, I had been waiting for him. He was late, and I had the computer on my lap, and I was re-looking at the class modules of the Holy Womb Chakra system. So I said, well, you know, I have been doing practices. And he said, well, what are these practices? Group therapy? And I just wasn't even going to go there. So, but I knew, you know. And then the third miracle was that I was looking at 100 houses in Columbia County and Berkshire County. And this was back in 2019 and 2020. And finally, I landed in this one house where the woman who was selling it had the exact same prayer card that I didn't bring it, I should have, the exact same prayer card that was my traveling prayer card of Mother Mary and Jesus with the Sacred Heart. And her name was Mary, and she had a devotion to Mary, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I said, wow, I didn't know Mary was a realtor on top of it all, you know? Like, so these are kind of the things. I mean, has anybody else had any kind of what you would call unusual or maybe miraculous experiences with Mother Mary? Raise your hand. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Not yet, but yeah, just wait. All right. So, you know, part of my interest. Yes, did you need something?
The card that you carried, did
yes.
that have Joseph on it?
No, it didn't have Joseph on
Okay,
it.
because the realtors use St. Joseph statue, you know, they bury him upside down.
Oh my God, that's very Italian. Okay, that's right, I've heard of that. Okay. So yeah, Mother Mary is available as a mentor on the inner planes because of what she has accomplished in her lives, which we'll talk about. And I believe that she is re-emerging at this time, along with Mary Magdalene, to help us move into our greater states of consciousness, what some people are calling fifth dimensional consciousness, etc. So she's here to help us both on that personal healing level and on that exalted spiritual level, because she really carries all of that within her. So I want to talk a little bit about Mary as a conscious priestess of divine conception. And this is material that I detail more fully in my book that is available back there, The Mystery Tradition of Miraculous Conception. What I discovered, the way I found this material, particularly about Mother Mary, and how I was able to hook it in with the Greek material, was that I looked at a little-known gospel called the Infancy Gospel of James. Does anybody know about this gospel? Right. Because it's one of those suppressed gospels called Apocrypha by a certain institution that shall remain nameless, that decided which ones were going to go in the official book and which ones were not. This one was rejected, although the Eastern Orthodox Church has used it in liturgies and things. The original title of it was Birth of Mary, which I thought was really interesting, Birth of Mary, because this gospel is all about Mary's conception from her mother Anne, Mary's infancy, how she was raised in the temple, the Hebrew temple, and how she conceived Jesus. It goes all the way up until the time where she is given birth to Jesus and the Holy Family is kind of on the run from Herod. So what I learned in reading this gospel, I was able to read this gospel and say, I know what this gospel is saying. I know what that means. I know what that symbol means. I know what they're describing here because I had done cartloads of research, literally cartloads of books going back and forth from interlibrary loan to my house on all of the ancient Greek material. So I was able to identify what are the signs, what are the symbols, what are the processes of these priestesses in Greece. And then I knew that's what Mary was doing. So what do I find out? Mary was one of several powerful women in her family and her lineage who were able to conceive miraculously. And again, we are talking about Anne, okay? Her mother who divinely gave birth to her. So a little bit of context of what is this divine birth thing? Why is it important? What I learned about from my research is that the purpose of a priestess learning how to conceive without male sperm in her body was because she was working at a very high spiritual level with her body, her mind, her spirit interface, in order to bring in what we would call a holy avatar, a being that was higher vibrational than the normal human. This was the purpose of it. So when you look at it that way, it kind of makes sense, like, oh, this was just a Siddhic practice. They call these things siddhis, S-I-D-D-H-I. The Siddhic practices are those that allow high-level adepts to defy the laws of matter and nature. So this is a practice that seemingly defies the laws of nature, but it's using a different series of rules, essentially. And so it was thought that these avatar level beings could incarnate only through this means, so that these priestesses were very sought after. And one of the things that I came to find out is that they would often be trafficked and abducted and moved around the planet. Okay, you often hear of the abduction of this Europa, is an example. These stories are talking about histories, in my opinion. So Europa, who was raped by Zeus and gave birth to, various beings, and then had the entire European continent named after her. Basically, if you look at all of the place names all over Europe and beyond, many, many, many of them are naming divine birth priestesses or their children. That's interesting, right? Including at the ancient oracle sites, and especially, because what I found out is that the oracle women, the psychics, the channelers of the time, and the divine birth priestesses were at one point one and the same. Because the female body is porous. It can receive divine inspiration, information, and it can receive divine spirits through the womb. So it makes sense that these two things are connected. These divine birth priestesses could be found all across the Mediterranean world and beyond, really the entire planet. There are stories of these divine births everywhere. What I talk about in my book is that this practice went through phases. The first and original phase was pure parthenogenesis, where the woman would conceive, she would become the androgyne, she would become the male-female within her, and she would spark her egg to be able to start the meiosis and receive the divine spirit and so forth. Very high-level practice, and I believe that's what Mary is being described as doing. A later stage was that, so the beginnings were female-female, because the eggs are basically female. A later stage was female-male production. So that's Mary's. So Mary's mother, Anne, gave birth to her in this way. That's a female-female parthenogenesis. And then Mother Mary giving birth to Jesus, that's female-male parthenogenesis. In later phases of this, you had a degradation of this. The patriarchy and the energies associated with it, shall we say, started to hijack, take over, control, and distort. And so these women would get co-opted and conscripted into doing divine birth in a different way. And one was to have a kind of an astral intercourse with beings in like a trance state or a meditation state, a medicine state, whatever. A later phase of that, and I detail where I am getting these ideas from in my book. What are the pieces of evidence, okay? From history, from legend, and from myth. Which I believe is a form of history, okay? Then you have these priestesses who are, this practice is morphing now, so it's no longer the priestess with the disembodied astral being, but it's the priestess now engaging with a male priest who is incarnated, but is channeling the energies of a divine masculine presence. And this is where we have the Egyptian pharaohs mating with the Egyptian queens, giving birth to the next line of pharaohs, the Horuses. So then you have, that where you have now male sperm, the men are able to take this practice and claim it for themselves and name the child in their name, whereas before it was a sovereign woman being able to give birth. It was not associated with any male. There was no male being given credit or taking control over this whole situation. The priestesshoods would govern, the nurses would take care of these children that were born in this way. And then you eventually have the latter day process where the women would use an artificial phallus, okay, like a dildo, essentially, in order to have this intercourse with the divine. And this is where Isis comes in. So they are describing with her an astral intercourse. Osiris has already gone over onto the other side, but she is using that sacred phallus, which is encoded in the myth that all of his parts were scattered, all of Osiris's parts were scattered, and she couldn't find the sacred phallus, so she had to fashion one. and then she became pregnant. That's what it's describing. And there's, by the way, there are all these dildos all over the place in ancient, Egypt and Greece, right, in the museums. And the scholars don't really know what to do with all this stuff. So to speak a little bit more about Mary then, what I come to discover is that Anne was one of these divine birth priestesses. And all of these details are in my book, but I'll just go through one little detail, for example, that shows us, situates Anne in the oracular priestess tradition. It's said that she becomes pregnant when she sits down at a laurel tree and she, quote, has a rest or goes to sleep. And this is telling us that, the laurel was famously known as the centerpiece of the oracle place of Delphi in Greece. That is where the women prophesied, eventually, the words of Apollo to great, confederations, all the way down to the common people. And so this is telling us Anne is an oracle priestess. Going to sleep means she's going into an altered state of consciousness, and she has all of these types of experiences that are described, and she eventually gives birth to or conceives Mary, and she is told by an archangel that the process has been complete. Now in Anne's case, she's a crone. She's an older woman. And so what this is telling us is that this practice could go on from the time women were maidens all the way through their elder years. And that these stories are not just quaint little tales of God granting a barren woman a child. But because I'm able to put all this information together, it's showing us that, they actually were part of a lineage of practice. They knew what they were doing. This wasn't happenstance. So that's what I argue in the book. And so when it comes to Mary, by the way, her name, Mariam, in the Hebrew, probably goes back to the Egyptian Mary, which is a word that means divine love. It means beloved of, the loving one, the one who is love, etc., etc., etc. So this name, as it has come down to us, Mary, is a priestess title. That's what I realized. That's why we have all these Marys running around the Bible. That's so confusing. Well, which Mary is it? Why are they all named Mariam? Well, because they were all being described as women in this lineage, the lineage of divine love, essentially. And sometimes that love had to do with heart activation, and sometimes it had to do with divine conception or other methods of conceiving. And one of the things that we find out about Mary and her conception of Jesus is that it happened when she was probably anywhere between 12 years old and 16 years old. So she was a maiden. And what this gospel tells us is that at the time that she has this conception, she is weaving. Okay? And there is a whole tradition of Hebrew temple weavers who were virgins. It is said that what they were weaving was the veil of the temple. But what I'm discerning here is that this was the cadre of divine birth priestesses. And that's why Mary is associated at the time of the conception with weaving, which is, of course, the perfect metaphor for divinely conceiving, right? She is weaving all right, but it's no mere textile. She's using the light-matter interface, the light-matter-sound interface, and that's what I explore and talk about in detail in the book. So what I'd like us to do is just take a little breath here. Because I've been sharing like a whole mother lobe, so to speak, of information. And I'd like us to spend about 10 minutes hearing from you, questions or comments, or where is this sitting with you?
So years ago, I guess someone I knew recommended this book. It was Anne, Grandmother of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
It's a channeled book. I was wondering if you had read it.
Yes. Yeah, okay, so here's the story about that. That is channeled material. The book Anna, Grandmother of Jesus, and the book Anna, Voice of the Magdalens. 2 different books, written by Claire Hartsong, who was regressed into a channeled state by Catherine Ann Clement, whom I know because I was in a women's group with her on divine birth. And Claire received unbelievable downpours that are in those 2 books about the Holy Family. Well, it turns out she was pretty much doing that channeling while I was starting to do the academic work, or it was like right around the same time. And after I finished my dissertation at CIIS in 2007, which became my first 2 books, The Cult of Divine Birth in Ancient Greece, and then Virgin Mother Goddesses of Antiquity, a friend said, "Oh, you've got to read this book." And so I found the book and I said, "Hey, I got Claire Hartsong's book that you recommended." And she said, "I never recommended Claire Hartsong's book to you." And I'm like, how the heck did I end up getting Claire Hartsong's book? But this is what happens, right? So I started reading. I haven't even read them in detail because in a way, I don't want to be too influenced. But I read through, I was like, oh my God, okay, she's talking about divine conception as a lineage thing. Oh my God, So then I calling Claire, and I met with her in Redding, California. And she's very interesting. And she said to me, well, when we first talked on the phone, and she's been a supporter, she's an endorser on the back of my book. I was so happy to have that. And she said, these were light conceptions. Light conceptions. And that hit me like a bolt of lightning, because I knew from the ancient Greek material there were a number of instances where it was said that the conception comes from a ray of light coming through the heavens, the cosmos. So it's like our work really converged together. And I had wanted Claire to teach with me, but she's kind of moved on to other stuff now. So we unfortunately wouldn't. But that'd have been a great class to have Claire Hartsong. Oh my God. Okay, yes.
So much comes up, of course. There's a whole, I also graduated from CIIS in their transformative doctoral program.
Okay.
And my study was this whole subculture of women who were now claiming their sovereignty over the birth process. And I see that in, organizations such as the Free Birth Society, this radical birth keeper movement, where autonomy is within the woman who's giving birth completely as an orgasmic experience. That's number one.
Yeah.
Number 2 is, it occurs to me that this whole fluidity of sexuality and transgender and mutilation of young bodies, and it's almost as if there is an attack on and I don't even know where to put it. I just know it's not balanced, it's not right, and it's chaos.
Yeah.
And it feels, I would love you to speak on it at some point, because I feel like it's an attack on both how men and women hold their sacred either masculinity or femininity.
Yeah.
That's number 2. And number 3 is, and I really think that I want to hear about your take on, you know, where does the male
Right.
how does he hold himself in a sacred masculinity in all this? And
Right.
his role.
That's right.
And then finally, are the gods and goddesses really real? You know, I'm always, even as a Catholic schoolgirl and trying to study Latin, I'd ask the nuns, well, I failed Latin because I needed to know that those myths, those Greek gods that they were teaching us, it just was real. I knew it was real.
Right.
I knew that there was something real about it, but they couldn't answer me.
Right.
They didn't say yes, and they didn't say no.
Yeah. Okay.
So I know that's a lot.
It is.
I just, you know, obviously I'm passionate. I think what you're doing is so important right now on so many levels.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, a 4-part question. Well, I'll start with men, because I knew that I was going to, the next thing I wanted to say from what you were saying was about men. So, you know, when I first started to have these downpours, and then I would be working with sacred medicines, most of the material I got was through academic research and then intuition. I didn't do a ton of sacred medicine journeys during this time when I was receiving this information, but some. And when in one of them, I got the message, if you bring this material out, do you want to create unity or division? And, you know, I was still more into my feminist phase at that point, and that just kind of like aligned me. And I was like, yes, okay, I get it. So whenever I talk about this, I always emphasize that divine birth is not something to do away with men. Because first of all, it's hard to do. It's a high holy practice, but it involves, as I've come to understand, it involves the woman becoming male and female at the same time. She has to become that androgyne on some level. That's the piece that I didn't really get until, like, you know, a few months ago. And I've been working with this stuff for a while. So this is not to do away with men. And there is a role for men in union, you know, sexual union, where the woman and the man can create what's called a divine child. And Sri Kaleshwar talks about this by using a mantra system during the act, okay? And that this is meant to bring in a higher vibrational child. So we have reproduction at all of these various levels. They're not going to do away with, you know, regular reproduction, which is never regular. I mean, it is its own miracle, right? So that's one thing about men. Very important. The masculine and feminine are very important to our world, our, you know, our whole system, the whole entire cosmos is that. Although, like Amachi says, she's like, well, if you have to look at God as more female or male, I would say female, but it's because she contains the male within her. You know, it's like she's the yin-yang, and then there's yin and yang within it, right? So that's kind of how I look at it. But also there was a role for these sacred male consorts of these women. Mary had Joseph, Anne had Joachim, Sarah, their ancestor who gave divine conception to Isaac, had Abraham. Elizabeth, who gave divine birth to John the Baptist, had Zechariah. These men, what I understand is that they were not conjugal husbands. They were partners and supporters and holders of the space for these high women. Okay? So there were various roles. And Claire Hartsong talks about that even in these divine conception rituals, the men would be doing their energetic thing. while the woman was doing her energetic thing. And I do find evidence for that in the Birth of Mary Gospel, and I talk about that. The shifting of gender trans situation. So like anything in duality, it has its positive polarity and its negative polarity, right? What's the positive polarity of it? Well, there's been so much abuse regarding male, female. There's been so much constriction and control of what is male, what is female, what's the right thing, what's the wrong thing, denigration of the female, denigration of the male, that they're just saying the heck with it. You know, I don't want any part of that. I want to unify. I want to unify. I want to become that Mary androgyne. However, as with anything that has a positive valence, there are forces that will come in, twist it or invert the matrix or do whatever they do, and then create the problem where it gets to an extreme, like there's no such thing as a womb. There's no such thing as a woman. There's no such thing as a male. And that's where a lot of people have issues, because it's denying a very force of nature and the creative cosmos itself. And it's turning it into another form of repression, where, well, you can't be part of this thing, I can't be part of this thing, you can't use that word, I can't use this word, I am identifying myself as this, I am not that. You know, it just becomes suppressive now of other things, as well as controlling of children and so forth and so on. So that's what I would say. There's the positive and the negative aspect to it, right? Let's have another question. Yeah.
I just wanted to ask a clarification, if I could. You used a word I'm not familiar with. You said a positive valence.
Yeah, the positive aspect and a negative aspect in duality, right? There's always a positive and a negative. What's the positive side of it? Valence is another way of saying the energy.
Energy.
The positive energy. What's the negative energy? Okay. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. There are two things, and I'd like you to go into the future, not just talking about the history of the past. Let's accept that as true.
Yeah.
And then go from there. Let's say the vaccination has synthesis in it, and that is a problem for procreation.
Has what?
Has
A substance that creates problems for
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
using your method,
For what?
we should be able to go ahead, and even though that may be a problem, let's say it is, then we still can conceive all these beautiful teenagers and others that are coming up and wanting to have children. They can.
Yeah, because
part of that, the second part of the future is, why not, if we can conceive of all the ideas we've already conceived of, why can't men grow their womb and have a baby also?
Yeah. So, yes, and before I go into your questions, I want to say about the relevance of this divine birth material is it does really point to the power of women's wombs. And these holy womb chakra teachings, which, by the way, I teach. I offer a class. I'm certified to teach that system that I learned from Cindy, and it's powerful. I do recommend it. So, first of all, just understanding the power of the holy womb and its capacity to conceive divine children, avatar level children, to conceive higher vibrational children through conscious conception, and to use the womb in other ways besides conception. But it's, Sri Kaleshwar talks about the power of the purified womb. That woman is able to do miracle level healing for other people, for the planet, you know, have many other Siddhic powers associated with it, influenced reality in a positive way. We have to restore this power of the womb because it's been dampened down and closed off and all these sorts of things. So in terms of, you know, if men want to grow a womb and have a baby, be my guest. But not all men want to. Why would they? You know, it's like they have their own role, right? But they, like anyone else, like women, they birth tons of other things. They bring many other things to fruition. So it's a matter of, again, that womb essence, which all people can access. And Sri Kaleshwar says that men access it mainly through their mother and or a soulmate, a female soulmate. And, you know, a direct connection with Mother Divine. There's a lot in the way that men are creating. And so it's not like every single individual on the planet. We already have enough overpopulation, all right? Now, what was the other question, the first one that you said?
About the, in a way, reversal of not being able to have children because of the protein.
Oh, yeah.
Injections.
Right, you know, here's the thing. All of these manipulations that are trying to control the human species, the human mind, body, and spirit, they never can fully work. They could try and try and try, but they'll never get there because it's not coming from organic life. Because organic life requires the womb. Organic life can only be produced through a viable womb. Otherwise, it's cloning. Cloning is a limited time deal. And it requires tech. This is why even Zeus, the Anunnaki being, half Anunnaki reptilian, would be raping female goddesses because he knew he needed a womb to get his point across, so to speak, to get his children issued onto planet Earth. So they're always using the womb. And now they're trying to create artificial wombs, et cetera, et cetera. They have matrices that are artificial womb portals and so forth that they're using, you know, through these dastardly matrices that they're setting up, but on the inner planes. But they're never going to be able to supersede the womb. And so that's why it's most important that we understand about the womb and that we clear the womb and that we come back into empowerment with it. And this is really in women's hands now on the planet. And whatever toxicity and manipulations are going into the body through whatever means can always be transmuted down. Okay? So let's just take a 10-minute stretch break. I've got 3:08. Let's come back at 3:20. So that's about 12 minutes. Stretch break, bathroom. We're going to go into some more information about other aspects of Mother Mary. And then again, at the end, we're going to have the experience of working with Mother Mary directly. Okay? All right, so we are back. So what I'd like to talk about now is Mary as priestess, healer, and teacher. So where I'm looking now is one of these, again, apocryphal gospels called the Gospel of Bartholomew. This could be dated as early as the 2nd century, so it's pretty early, you know, close to the time of Christ. And this gospel talks about Mary's role in the early church. So over the past 30 years, some of us have become familiar with Mary Magdalene's role in the early church. Wow, she was a big leader, da-da-da. But it never even occurred to me that Mother Mary could have had anything, done anything except tell Jesus to turn water to wine at the wedding of Cana. I mean, really, she doesn't appear at all. And so I started looking at these other gospels and these biographies about Mother Mary that were written by, granted, later day priests and so forth. But they all seem to be referencing some earlier documents that may have been lost as well. Okay? So, in the Gospel of Bartholomew, it describes this particular scene where Mother Mary is inviting the male apostles to come together and hold sacred space. They all start debating about who should be leading this little ceremony, right? And interestingly, the men are like, no, you do it. No, you do it. No, you. No, Mother Mary, no, you, which is kind of an unusual thing, which shows us right away that the respect that they have for this master teacher. And Mary accepts the position of leading the ceremony. And what does she do? She stands up before the men. She spreads her hands up to heaven in that gesture. And she offers a long, holy utterance praising the divine. So she's basically channeling, right? And then there are these other later texts written about Mary. A collection of about 60 of them. They're called the Dormition narratives. Remember the Catholic Church, the Dormition of Mary, the Assumption of Mary? What I realize is, in their own way, the Catholic Church has been getting at something, which is that Mary had an ascension. It's like, has anybody read the books about the monks who go rainbow body? All right. These Tibetan monks and things like that, there's a book by Francis Tiso, T-I-S-O, about how these guys die. Basically, their body dissolves, and the rainbows are seen up over the place of their samadhi, right, the place of their death. So they don't really have a traditional death the way we think of it. And I think that's what the Catholic Church was getting at with Mary. She didn't either. So these narratives, called the Dormition narratives, are about her death passage, right? And we also see her as a high priestess in these. So what they describe her doing is using the censer. Who remembers the censer? From back in the day, Latin Catholic Mass. No. The priest is like going on in Latin. It's like, wow, it sounds so cool. And all of that frankincense and whatever incense that's going on, it's a censer to get the incense going into the room. Well, she is using a censer, which is telling us that she's on the level of the Hebrew priests, because only the Hebrew priests use these censers. And there she is. Another, interesting fact about Mary. Another one, a fragment, says that she puts on special vestments, clothing, to make an offering of incense to God. Again, this special outfitting and ornamentation is something of the priest or priestly caste. And then we hear that she preaches the gospel, meaning probably not, what you heard in church. Okay, this is like before they compiled any of that stuff. She's teaching, and when I'm tuning into what the heck was she teaching, well, she would have been teaching about Jesus's whole idea of opening your consciousness, sacred love, etc., etc., etc. That would have been it. She's teaching, she's leading prayers. She's burning incense, which incense both clears a place of negative energies and it draws in positive energies. This is a well-known, sacred practice in rituals. It facilitates connection with the divine. She is also said in these stories to heal with her hands. She exorcises demons. pretty powerful. She seals, that is, she baptizes. She, brings a blessing into a child. So then we hear in this manuscript called the 6 Books manuscript. And again, this might have been written as early as the 2nd century. And it's called 6 Books because it was said that the apostles wrote 6 books about Mary's death or death passage. And they had to carry it with them as teaching tools. So in this one manuscript that describes this, Mary is presented as the teacher of teachers. Wow. I mean, I never even thought of this. She says that a divine messenger, okay, so she works with the angelic realm. How many people in here work with the angelic realm? Okay. Mother Mary was working with the angelic realm. How do we know that in particular? Well, Angel Gabriel was involved with her divine conception. These archangels are on the scene because the women have to use the interface with these beings in order to have this high-level conception happen. And the angels are like, yes, 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 okay, done. Right? You've done it. You can stop weaving now. So, a divine messenger gave Mary a book of mysteries and told her to pass it on to the apostles. So she's receiving this incredible information. And presumably the book didn't just come to her, maybe she had to write it down. Okay? She was channeling, she was serving as an oracle, wrote it down, and then these things are copied in the older days, and they're given to these apostles. And these guys and women are going around teaching from it. Book of Mysteries. Wow. What would Mary's Book of Mysteries be? Wouldn't that be so cool to do a channeling on that? Mm-hmm. What would her Book of Mysteries be? Come up, sit in the second row. And again, women numbered among these apostles. It's not just the 12 men. Women. And Mary Magdalene was head of the women, and Peter was head of the men. And Mary was head of all of them. That's what these biographies and these documents tell us. That Mary also gave these books to these female evangelists, and they would deliver teachings in Rome, Alexandria, Athens, Beirut, and Thessalonica. These are just some of the cities that these people would go. So what these narratives say is that women would come from all over the Mediterranean to learn from Mary, and then she'd send them out to teach. And then they'd come back to her every Easter, and she'd be like, how did it go? And they'd talk about their issues and their problems and their successes or whatever. So she was just like, hey, go forth, preach this ascension material. So Mary was a supporter of women, a supporter of spiritual priestesses, a supporter of, these women who were teachers. She was a mentor. And what we are told is that from her infancy, she's been surrounded by these groups of priestesses. In the infancy gospel, her birth, the birth of Mary gospel, at 3 years old, she's taken by the group of priestesses from the Hebrew temple, and she's raised in the temple from then on. Her parents don't really see her anymore. So she's got that cadre of women who are teaching her. And then we find that after the crucifixion, basically all of this is describing after the crucifixion, she was regularly tended by 3 daughters of Jerusalem, all holy virgins. These women had left their parents and their families to minister to her and learn from her. And they were from wealthy and powerful Jewish families. They followed Mary wherever she went. And they were the primary ministrants in that death ritual that she underwent in order to have an ascension. We even hear their names. Caletha, who was the daughter of a friend of Jesus. Neshra, who was the daughter of the head of the synagogue. And Tabitha, who was a member of the family of Nero Caesar. This is like putting it in historical context suddenly. Like, wow, real women who were walking around Mary, hanging out with her, tending to her every need. During Mary's death process, she's getting ready to have this transition. We hear that people come to her with offerings, and she is able to offer prayers and sprinkle water over them. And she cures people coming to see her of leprosy, bladder conditions, blindness or sight problems, etc. It's said that she cured 2,600 men, women, and children from this deathbed. And there's a whole story of how when this mob of people who are irritated from the powers that be come and try to take her away or stop her from this practice, there are these various miraculous things that happen. And she's able to escape this. So, I next want to talk about Mary as a womb master, because I sort of hinted at that. Yes, let's take some questions on that.
How old was she when she passed?
Well, there's different timelines as to what that could have been, but she could have been in her 80s. Okay, nobody really knows for sure. I tried to do a calculation that made it look like she would have been quite young, but I think she did grow into her elderhood.
Jesus was 32 or 33 when he died, right?
Right.
And she was a teenager when she gave birth to him. So that would put her in her 50s, right? Late 50s?
When he died, right? Or wait.
Oh, when he died. I'm sorry.
When he died, so add 12 or 13 years to his age.
Mm-hmm. But then she lived for a long time.
Yeah, then she lived beyond that. Okay. Yeah, other questions? Yeah,
so you spoke about the Greek lineage of women.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned that Mary and her mother were in that lineage. How did that lineage transition into Judaic context?
right. I think what was happening is that everywhere on the planet where there were holy, sacred people and women, there was a divine birth practice. So it wasn't necessarily that it spread from Greece to the Hebrews or that it spread from the Hebrews to the Greeks. It's kind of in the whole milieu. It was a part of the knowledge of humans.
So from what I understand, I don't have much of a knowledge of that tradition, but from what I understand, it was a highly patriarchal society and system. I'm talking about Judaism in general. And, how was that allowed to be performed and nourished?
Right. What I talk about that in the cult of divine birth in ancient Greece, that this would be a very old substratum of priestess practice on the planet. And that as patriarchy started coming into it, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, they started to take it over, distort it, hijack it, use it for its own ends, use it to bring in certain beings that maybe the priestesses initially would not have wanted to bring in, like the patriarchal heroes. That's how they all came. Theseus, Perseus, Heracles, Alexander the Great are all said to have come in this way. So it became misused the patriarchy took it, controlled it, and distorted it for its own ends. And the women either tried to maintain the purity of it, or they got strong-armed into going a different way, or some of them went willingly in the latter days, like Alexander's mother, Olympias. Okay, she would have cooperated with these forces to bring through one such as Alexander, who was then kind of a, patriarchal nightmare going all over the known world at that time. But there were other women, like the mothers of Plato and Pythagoras, who gave birth in this way, but they were able to maintain a higher level, a higher frequency. Their sons, Plato and Pythagoras, were helpful to humanity on some level, whereas some of the other ones who were born in this way wreaked havoc. So it was a whole kind of transition, and all the while that patriarchy was encroaching, there were pockets of women who were trying to keep it pure, trying to keep it original. Okay? Yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
How do you factor in and look at the schism in the Orthodox and Catholic traditions? And listening to you, I'm remembering something about spiritual marriage, and I think it's called a sub-introducti. Have you come across that?
No, what's sub-introducti?
So in like the 300s or something like that, there were monks, and the way the article would present it is there were monks in spiritual practice, but not women. So the women would live with the monks and be celibate. But the church in general, I think it was St. John Chrysantha something, I don't remember his last name. He was citing these births as a reason to disband the spiritual practice.
I see.
So I'm wondering if this falls in with any of your research.
Oh, that would be so interesting to discover more about. I'm not familiar with that. Births were resulting. Were they actually having sexual union, or was it something else?
I don't know. It's just peripheral research for me. But it's just interesting if there was an actual lineage that was being practiced, and then that was being perceived by the authority as against their authority.
That's right. It could well be. I mean, I think these things go underground. And for all I know, there's an unbroken lineage of divine birth somewhere on the planet that has just gone underground, where the women are fully conscious of what's going on. It's so secret. The negative part of that, the negative hijacking of it, would be something like Rosemary's Baby. Okay? Now, the first part of your question was about the schism between the Orthodox Judaism and Christianity?
No, like the Greek.
Oh, the Greek Orthodox. And the Greek Orthodox tradition is much more connected to the sacred feminine. That's what I know about that. Churches to Sophia, they're very much more connected to Mary. They give honor to the birth of Mary gospel, etc. But I'm not an expert in Eastern Orthodox, but that's what I would say, that they still retain, I think, a lot of the pre-Christian roots in what they do. I remember going to a ceremony in Greece, and they had a big basket of bread, and that was communion. They were doling it out. I'm like, this is so pagan, right?
Do you know about the Gospel of Q?
Yes.
The original Gospel in 15 AD. I don't know anything about it. I just recently acquired a few little books written about it. One by Thomas, with an introduction by Thomas More, who wrote Care of the Soul. So I respect him highly as a mentor of mine when I was young. So I'm going to read it, but I don't know if there's something you can offer.
I know, I don't know a lot about it, and I just don't know if it's like one of those super academic things where they discerned that underneath Matthew is the Gospel of Q. I think it's something like that, but I'm just not sure.
Yeah, apparently it was, everything else was based on
it was based
the original Gospel, which was not to look at Jesus' life as much as his teachings of love and healing, and so there wasn't this focus on sacrifice and and resurrection and all of those different topics, but his actual divine teachings.
Yeah, and where I go is just what they call the Gnostic Gospels now. I just go straight to the Gospel of Philip, the Gospel of Thomas. That's where all the interesting information is. The Gospel of Mary, which is Mary Magdalene, different gospel than the one that I write about, but where Mary Magdalene is given sacred teachings, secret teachings from Jesus about the ascension of the soul, etc. So there's bunches of, if you look at the Gnostic Bible that was compiled and edited by Marvin Meyer and Willis Barnstone, that's a really good compendium. And then they have the Nag Hammadi texts as well. I think Marvin Meyer has done that. These are big, thick, but they're just great to read. Okay, let me go on, and I want to talk a little bit more about Mary as a womb master, and then Mary as a mother. Okay, and then we're going to come back and have an experience together. So as I've been talking about, there are these sacred holy womb chakra teachings that have come to us from the ancient palm leaf manuscripts, from the Saptarishis, the 7 sages of the world, who really ultimately got it from Mother Divine. Like, this is a transmission from Sacred Feminine. And these mantras, the prayers that you utter, and the yantras, the drawings that you draw as a part of the system, are all part of that. And Kaleshwar, Sri Kaleshwar, the Hindu saint, says that Mother Mary was part of that lineage. She knew these practices, she used these practices, and so forth, so that she was a womb master. And the other thing that he says about her is that she had millions of lifetimes to perfect herself into the being we know as Mary, which was her last incarnation before she had her full ascension into goddesshood, becoming one with Mother Divine, who can also retain her personality as Mary, so we can all connect with her as that personality, but she has the resonance of Mother Divine coming through her. And Sri Kaleshwar said that Mother Mary was 99.99% Mother Divine, because in her lifetime she had finalized all the prayers and the processes that she needed to do to make that, even really before she had her transition, even really before she conceived Jesus. And that there's a whole story that I go into in my class called the Mother Mary Mystery Teachings, where we find out how Mother Mary conceived, not conceived Jesus, but how she prepared to conceive. And I'll give you a little taste of that now. She engaged in these yogic practices, okay, in order to create Jesus' soul. That's what Sri Kaleshwar says. So when we think about that, we're realizing, wow, okay, she created Christ consciousness, or she pulled it through, from the outer dimensions into this dimension. That is a pretty high level womb function. And some of the other yogas she used were prayer. She would get up at like 2 in the morning. She would sleep. Okay, here was her little protocol. This is Mother Mary's practice, according to Sri Kaleshwar. He said, like most saints, she slept and dreamt from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. She woke up and meditated from 2 to 3 a.m. And then she communicated with the angels from 3 to 5 a.m. So that means she's, receiving her divine downpours. And she was involved in this practice during the first month of her pregnancy. Mother Mary accomplished the siddhis. She was able to master earth, air, fire, and water. And in her third month of pregnancy, she learned how to enter a body and make it come alive as it after it died. Okay, and this is called bringing the dead back to life. Is called in the Vedas parakaya pravesh. So she knew how to do this, and Jesus knew how to do this. And then Jesus was involved during the crucifixion in another yoga called Atma Khandana Yoga, which is the process of bringing one's soul out of one's body, dividing it into parts, and then receiving it back into the body. So he was able to kind of like get his soul out of the crucified, preserve it out of the crucified body, and kind of maintain like a thread. And what Kaleshwar said, this was the thing that just blew us all away. All right, I'm going to just say it. That Mother Mary, after she took Jesus' body down from the cross, and it's really interesting because it is said in her Christian biographies that she had time alone with that body, that she put him on her lap, think the Pietà from Michelangelo, put him on her lap, and she did these Atma Khandana Yoga. She did this Atma Khandana Yoga and resurrected him through her womb. And that's about, God upstairs resurrecting Jesus. I mean, here it is. So now Sri Kaleshwar says that Jesus went body and soul to India, where there were great rishis and saints watching this process, helping, and receiving him. And that he had a whole life in India after this with Mary Magdalene. That is a bit different than some of the other timelines that we're told, but I think it's very interesting. And we do have these Hindu recordings in rock walls and different things that Jesus was there. I don't know at what time, before or after his crucifixion. So this was so interesting because when I had done a medicine ceremony one time, I received, hey, you can open up your womb and let all your dead ancestors go back to the light through your womb. I was like, wow, really? Should I do that? And I wasn't sure. I did a little bit of it and then I stopped. But this is years before hearing any of this, so it did have a resonance for me. Like, again, this power of the womb, what is it capable of? Can we bring those ancestors to the light who are stuck, at the Roman Colosseum because they were all traumatized? Maybe we can all go and just sit there and be like, hey, come to the light. But I would think it would have to be another really careful yoga. Like, you don't want to, I was like, I don't think I know all the rules about this. I don't know all the, I don't think I want to get too involved in that, but I'm just putting it out there because probably women are doing it and women can resurrect that, so to speak. So I just want to say a few more things. No, I'm just going to do some questions and then we're going to take a break. Yeah.
Okay, so I studied with Barbara Brennan, and she spoke about a time, I don't remember the context that she said this in, but that she had gone to hell in some form, and that she had evoked the name Jesus Christ. She was very scared, I guess. And all the beings that she encountered there said, Jesus Christ, who's that? And that really surprised her because the Bible says that Jesus ascended into heaven and then he descended into hell. Mm-hmm. So this is maybe off topic, I don't know, but it seems like it's part of that moment of the resurrection.
I don't know, but maybe she called him by his wrong name. That's what I'm receiving. Maybe she needed to call a different name. Anyway, we'll just put that on hold. Yes.
Thinking about like this idea of the succubi or like these erotic kind of dreams that men or women have about supernatural beings coming to them for sexual, relationships. Like, does that have a relationship to this history or
Yes.
this kind of?
Yeah, it does. As does alien abduction. It's all related. It's all the misuse of the holy womb and the sacred phallus and the reproductive energies of humanity by these negative beings who love to harvest in that particular area.
So are women, like, would you say women potentially could be more vulnerable to intrusion by
Yes.
psychic entities because they do have wombs?
Yes,
and they
it's happened every day of the week for perhaps thousands of years.
Because that's like a big thing in the history of many cultures. Is
That's
this
right.
idea of psychic intrusion.
That's right. And it's a big cleanup operation that needs to happen on the planet.
A what?
Cleanup operation.
And so I guess there's this balance of like, this idea of opening our wombs as like this portal in a way.
Right.
Yeah.
That's why you want to do it with the prayers and the practices to purify it and call in the protections. And I would not recommend to anybody to transfer ancestors to the light from your womb without really knowing what you're doing. But I'm just mentioning that it did come to me, and therefore there was validation when I heard what Sri Kaleshwar was saying about Mother Mary doing that for Jesus on an even higher level. So yeah, this is a whole big, huge topic.
Yeah. And this last quick question, like in the Buddhist lineage of like, incarnation and like of ascended master, like, is this sort of have a parallel to what we're talking about here?
In the Buddhist tradition?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Buddha has a story of coming out of his mother Maya's side. Those unusual birth or conception stories are always talking about a divine conception on some level or something that went on.
But even today, there's sort of like this idea that like, certain masterful beings are going to be intentionally incarnated at certain times. And so it seems a little bit in the same tradition.
Yeah. And there's a lot of talk now about star seeds coming in despite, whether the women are conscious or not. These children are just kind of coming in. So it would be all the better if the parents could consciously conceive, draw in specific beings or beings from the lighted realms or whatever to help turn this planet around. Okay.
Surround the place with white light besides the mantras, but you have to visualize you're in a room with white light.
Say it again now.
White light surrounding the bed, so to speak, if it's in a bed, or bale of hay, with white light.
That's right. There are many tools for nighttime protection and other time protection. And white light, also golden light, is a big protector. And in psychic training school, I learned other techniques of putting out a reverse mirror ball, putting a rotating, like a rotating door so that anything that comes in that's negative just goes right out. There's different things you can do. Yes.
So I'd love to know and hear your feelings and thoughts about, as far as like connecting Mother Mary's, let's say, mystery teachings, or what they would be, or what was written in some of these Gospels, to the quote-unquote apocalypse times that is written in the Bible. And as far as like what would be her take, or what could be her take on our challenging times now and for the future of humanity?
Let's bring that question back in the last half hour when we're all kind of in more of an expanded state. Yeah, that's perfect. Okay, good. One last one, and then we'll take another quick break and then come back for an experience, all right?
I'm coming at this from a very naive place because a lot of this is new to me. So I just want to clarify something for myself, and I think it's pretty obvious, but I just would like you to validate that for me.
Yeah.
The point of divine birth is, as opposed to regular reproduction between a male and a female, is to call into being a higher vibrational being that can, with high powers of healing and wisdom and to help the planet.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right.
That seems to be like the bottom line of this. And
That's right. If that's the one thing, yes, exactly. That's
it. A lot of
it.
help. The planet needs a great
The planet needs a lot of help, and
So-
especially right now,
Right.
you know, where what we're all going through
Right.
is no accident.
Okay, just wanted to
Yeah.
put that out there.
These are the times.
Yeah. But I mean, obviously there's always been need because this
That's
has been
right.
going on for a very
For
long
quite a long time. And what I've come to is that it's not even so much that we need divine avatars coming in as we need to become the divine avatar. Okay? That's the point that we're at. It's not about we're going to have a big leader out there who's going to save us. No. We are becoming the Christ Sophia, or whatever terms you want to use to describe that opening of consciousness.
So that's a different kind of birth. It's coming into consciousness.
That's right.
As opposed to the divine birth itself, the conception, and then it's a different way.
It's literally like giving birth to yourself, transmuting all aspects of your body, mind, spirit, DNA into a higher dimensional frequency. Greater awareness, more open heart, etc.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, blessed be. So let's take another, let's just make this like a quick 5-minute stretch break, pee break, drink break, and then come back at, well, you're getting 7 minutes, so come back at 4:05, okay? Thank you. We're going to move now from head to spirit and to heart. Okay. So yes, I'm inviting us all just to close our eyes. Feel the bottoms of your feet, your toes, your fingertips. Once again, feel the weight of your body on the floor, which is Mother Earth embracing you. Feel your breath. Just feel that you are enveloped in a sphere of golden light, and that our kiva is enveloped in a sphere of pearly white light, crystalline diamond, iridescent white light. And if you want, you might have your attention in your third eye, the center of your head. But no matter what we do, where we go, you're always feeling your body connected to Mother Earth. And to facilitate that, just see, we're asking Mother Earth to receive our grounding. Just see that the circumference of your abdomen is becoming a stretchable tree trunk that you're dropping through the floor in this building, deep into the soil of the earth. Feel those roots spreading. And they're literally pulling the golden light from the center of the earth up your central channel, your chakras, and out your crown into your auric field, 3 feet out in every direction, all the way down around below your feet. We're seeing in the center of this kiva a grandmother redwood tree, a beautiful, tall, wide, straight tree with reddish interior wood and furry strip-like bark and sloping boughs like a cedar. We're asking Mother Earth to receive the grounding of this kiva. And we're seeing that tree stretching through the floor of this building, deep into the soil of the earth, the roots spreading. And from this place of safe groundedness, we are honoring Mother Earth beneath and around us. And we are calling on Mother Mary. Perhaps this is your first time working with this master. Perhaps you are familiar. Maybe you are seeing her with new facets to her crystal today. We're feeling her energy come in. And as we feel her presence growing in this space, perhaps with each of us, we are activating all of the aspects of what we've learned about her today, whether you remember it or not. We're just saying hello to Mother Mary as a manifestation of supreme divine female source creator. So she taps into that larger energy, but she's also personal, which is why she came to the planet, one of the masters who was granted the permission to do so, to work directly with humanity. And as we are at the time tomorrow of the holiday we have honored as Mother's Day, we're calling Blessed Mother to be with each of us now. Just feel her. And ask, invite her to work with you individually in whatever way you feel you still need mothering, need re-mothering, need nurturing, whether you've been a parent or not. This is a time for you now. And just see what Mother Mary would like to do. Does she want to put one or both of her hands somewhere on your body? Does she want to enfold you in her cloak, sit you on her lap, invite you into her womb? Just feel yourself receiving energies, activations, and nurturance from Mother Mary at this time. And just allow yourself to imagine going to be quiet now to allow you to have this experience, letting your imagination run freely with this. Allow this to melt into you at the level of your DNA, this divine nurturance. And from Mary as Mother, we are now inviting Mary as Healer. Is there some other aspect of your body, mind, spirit that you'd like healing with? Invite her to work with you now. Perhaps it's continuing with what you are doing with her, or perhaps it's shifting a bit. And just use your imagination and allow. And allow this healing to melt into you down to the level of your DNA. Now we are working with Mother Mary in her aspect as teacher. Have Mother Mary show you something that she has to teach you, perhaps in your life, perhaps about your heart, perhaps about the cosmos or the world. Just use your imagination and receive. What is Mother Mary teaching you right now? Let this teaching melt down into your DNA. And now open to Mary as an oracle for you. You have a question for her about your life, and allow yourself to receive whatever answer she offers you on this matter now. Let this answer melt down into your DNA. And now with Mother Mary as our inspiration, I invite you to, if you're feeling called, to offer a question out loud to the oracle, and I will be offering the response that's coming through me. Shall we start with the question of that young woman from earlier? Would you like to repeat it? So what is Mother Mary's take on the teachings of Jesus for our present time as it relates to the apocalypse? Yes? So what I'd first like to do is invite each of you to take that question into your heart with Mother Mary by your side. And just spend a moment imagining what she's telling you. Good, and what I will offer is that ultimately it's all about love, which you probably already know. But we cannot be reminded of this enough because of the chaos of emotions that are continually getting stirred within us and around us. Love, of course, starts with the self, for it is easier to love others and bring love into the world when you have that regard toward yourself. So this remains an inside job. And the thing about love is it is a great power. It's not just a platitude. It's not just a fleeting feeling. It's not just something that we are to apply to others or situations, but something rather to radiate. It's closely allied with peace because it's easier to feel love when we feel peace. So everything you can do to experience peace, calming your breathing, going into your meditations, being out in beautiful places in nature and sitting quietly or walking quietly, whatever brings you peace will be the first step toward love. Love is an energy to radiate inwardly and outwardly, and it serves as the greatest protection. Some of us were talking before about this. It is literally not just something to benefit you, to help you get along with others and feel better, but it is something that helps you move into the next frequency, and therefore move out of the zone that certain other energies are operating on. You can bypass them, or they literally will take an about face. So Jesus in the desert may well have been working quite a bit with the love energy as he was witnessing or experiencing the panoply of beings that were coming before him, showing their power and splendor. So let's have another question. If you're feeling called, something that whose answer would benefit others present.
For those of us who have not birthed children through our wombs, what would be, how did we cultivate, or what would be, what could we birth through our wombs to sort of...
What could you birth through your wombs?
Yeah.
All of the actions, activities, and projects that inspire you, all of the nurturing and care that you have for other people's children, the people who have not had children are as valuable and needed as those who have, because the people who have not had children are available in different ways to help the people who had children and those children. You see? So it's a cooperative situation. Everyone has their role. Doing what inspires you creatively, be it in the realm of art or the realm of something healing or the realm of creating organizations or groups or social systems, or whatever is inspiring you is what's needed. So working with the people who can help you cultivate that will allow you to understand the role of your womb much better. Let's have another question.
How can we help Vladimir Putin heal from his destructive, evil hate and greed for power and death?
Right. Well, the first step is to help ourselves from, with our healing toward our own destructive tendencies, love for power, control aspects, unreasonableness, etc. Because he's just a mirror. Anything on the outer plane is just a reflection of what's on the inner plane, still wanting healing within each of us. That's the place where you can be most productive. Working in those arenas within your own lives, your own self, your own families, your own systems, communities. Can you heal those tendencies so that you can have a successful community? There's still a ways to go here with that. These external events are mirrors that will switch and change like a kaleidoscope. And sometimes the spectacle of them is a hall of mirrors situation as well. So focusing on really getting good at bringing all that healing into our own lives is one of the best things we can do whenever those mirrors reflect those aspects. Let's have another question.
Yeah. If we get to the point where we think we love ourselves, how do we stay in that place?
It can be challenging, again, in this world of so many fears being stirred, so many chafings and irritations. So what do you do to stay in peace or to cultivate peace? I'm going to invite each of you just to think about that right now. And that's the answer to your question. So spend a few moments with this. What do you do to cultivate peace? So the answer is do more of that on a regular basis.
There are those that say we are moving from the Piscean age of the Savior to something else where there isn't the oppressor, the oppressed, the Savior. What would that be? How do we imagine that?
Imagine you on your best, most peaceful, loving day. Just do that right now. And let's ask Mother Mary to amplify that energy, that vibration, and those feelings within us. This again, and everything we've been doing here today, is part of that road. It must happen within first in order for it to happen outside. And that is the great lesson of this era. It's about the mirror. Let's have another question.
Are there any specific messages or energetic transmissions for this specific group of people here today that will uplift our collective consciousness of this specific community?
We're being invited for everyone to tune into that energy of blessing. Feeling Mother Mary's blessing for us today in this particular configuration. This information is even coming through only because of this particular group, with each person present being here. So let's just allow ourselves to receive that blessing from Mother Mary for this group, for the community that this group is a part of, and for the groups that are connected with all of us in here. And feel that blessing spreading to the net of which we are all a part. And that is the perfect way to conclude this portion. So if you feel so inspired, just thank Mother Mary in her holographic fractal aspect that has come to your mind, your body, mind, spirit, and that has collectively come to our group. Take a deep breath in and out. Begin to wiggle your fingers and toes. Gently open your eyes. Just feel your grounding. We're going to spend our last 15 minutes here just in conversation and see if you can maintain the energy of what you've just gone through in how we're conversing, because this is part of the process of bringing in that higher dimension into this dimension, being alert and awake, but also conscious. If you know what I mean. Noticing when and how we might start wanting to get into the head a little bit too much. So I'm inviting anybody to share what they'd like to from that. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.